You shouldn't be using triggered as an excuse. Everybody's triggered, everybody's triggered nowadays. Triggers, triggers, triggers. What are triggers? This is James, and I haven't been out alone in such a long time. I am the social and another stress protector for Brandy. And I haven't been around a long time. Like, I have, but Brandy can't tell the difference between me and Flair. Okay, like she has trouble deciphering us. So I'm a girl, James, I'm 16, and I'm here to talk about triggers today because we need to talk about triggers. Oh, by the way, there will be noise coming out of my window because it's open and I live in a big city, so it's gonna be loud sometimes. So I apologize in advance for that. Anyway, triggers. We were watching Frenemies the other day, and we like everybody, and we saw the breakup. And so what I saw Trisha getting triggered. And then I saw the fallout, and I saw what everybody was saying to Trisha, that, you know, it was her fault. Basically, it was sort of like a witch hunt. You're the witch, dunk the witch, burn the witch, witch, she's the bad person. Personally, I think it lies somewhere in the middle, and I don't think people give Trisha enough of a chance anymore. Like, they never give her a chance ever since I've been on YouTube. You know, I hear she's had a history of trolling, so, you know, that's a thing. But anyway, I saw that Trisha was triggered and she went into fight or flight. And so first she fought verbally and then she fled. And that's what I saw. And so I wanted to talk about the term triggered because I was reading comments and people are like, you know, you shouldn't be using triggered as an excuse. Everybody's triggered, everybody's triggered nowadays. Can anybody, like, triggered? Here's the problem. Triggered and triggering, that verb, originally comes from mental health. Like, I don't know about originally, but before it was what it is today. Before it was what this colloquial term is. Basically, the colloquial term is like, if any little thing irritates you, if you see a meme that's annoying, you're triggered. If you, I don't know, get cut off and you get agitated, you're triggered. That's the colloquial term. And what it's done is it's totally diluted the medical term, triggered. So Trisha is somebody who suffered a lot of trauma in her life. She is diagnosed with, I think, BPD, and that indicates trauma. And so I knew she was triggered, and then I saw people attacking her for using it as an excuse. Okay, when an average person who does not have PTSD gets triggered, it's a little annoyance. That's what that means. You're annoyed, you're irritated. When a person with PTSD gets triggered, it's entirely different. It is serious. And I have DID, and everybody with DID also has PTSD and CPTSD. And so when someone like me, or, you know, maybe Trisha, I'm not sure, but someone like me, if I get triggered and I have severe PTSD, that could be an emergency. That could end up deadly. Bad things can happen when people who have actual PTSD are really triggered. And that's why we don't want this term diluted the way it has been, just horribly diluted, because it ends up silencing mentally ill people. Like, let's say I was triggered and I had a flashback. I'd be afraid to talk about it on here because people be like, triggered, man, triggered. Triggered. You know, and I just want it to be clear that PTSD triggers are entirely not even the same ballpark as the colloquial term being used right now as triggered. So, I'll give you an example. This is the classic example. You've got a Vietnam veteran driving down the street. A car driving near him backfires. He pulls his car over really fast to the side of the road, jumps in the ditch, covers his head, and just panics. Because the backfire was the trigger. The trigger reminded him of a trauma, and he physically had to relive the emotions and experience of that trauma Because the thing is the thing about flashbacks and stuff like that with PTSD and DID and stuff like that is they can be caused by so many different things. Anything associated with the trauma can be a trigger. Whether the sky was a certain color blue that day, a towel was hanging on the rack, a smell in the air, anything. And at any point, and here's the thing, is when you're triggered, I mean, not triggered, sorry, is when, I'm not as good as being like as organized as Brandy is about these things, you know. So, okay. Oh, now I forgot what I was saying. Okay, let's think about this for a minute. Let's retrace our brain. Okay, so I don't know where I left off, but I'm just gonna go wherever my brain says it's going, and I'm a little bit sweaty because it's hot today. Okay, so a flashback is caused by a misfiled memory. So people with PTSD have memories in their brain that are not filed properly. They're not filed as past. They're stuck as potentially present day memories. So that's why it's so easy to trigger someone with PTSD, and a severe trigger can happen at any time, depending on what's around you. And so if your memories are not filed properly due to trauma, then your brain thinks they are present tense. So if they're present and these memories are just happening right now, a trigger can set off a flashback. And flashbacks are awful. They're awful. They are just like, not fun at all, guys. Not fun at all. They aren't fun. And like we had a flashback, an emotional flashback, which sometimes those can be worse because you don't realize that this is not happening because of anything that's happening in the present. You have a trigger, you think something in your environment caused it, and then you just have this horrible emotional reaction. And the last emotional flashback I had, you know, it's as simple as this. I was looking for the charger to my phone, okay? And I couldn't find it, and my phone was almost dead. So I started getting anxious. That type of anxiety I felt, because emotions themselves can be triggers. That anxiety that I felt must have been very similar to a certain anxiety I must have felt as a kid, because it went from anxiety to panic in 0 to 60. I went into a state of such panic that I started screaming, just like that, just screaming, and I couldn't stop. You know, and I couldn't because I had to live out that emotional flashback until it was done. And that's why it's important for people to understand that people with PTSD and DID and things like that, when they're saying triggered, they mean something serious. Triggers can be deadly for people like us. Because emotional flashbacks they cause horrible feelings. You don't feel in control when it's happening. I felt like I was a puppet. I was watching, like, have you ever seen Being John Malkovich? It's sort of like this shower scene where somebody goes into his brain and he's just showering. They can't control his body. They can just see through and feel everything, but they couldn't control anything. And so it was sort of like that. Although I can't, like Brandy can't remember a lot of the flashback, but I can remember more of it than she can because, you know, we black things out for her, guys. And so it was just a disaster. And that's why we need to, if somebody with PTSD uses the term triggered, we need to take it seriously. We don't need to brush that off. If somebody without PTSD uses the term triggered, then you can be like, yeah, I guess they're irritated about something. But that's the problem with words. That's why words have specific meanings. But you see, English is a living language. It's constantly changing. Words start to mean other things over time. For instance, the word trigger originally wasn't even spelled trigger, it was spelled tricker. Like T-R-I-C-K-E-R in the OED. So over time, it evolved into the word trigger. And so, you know, as a living language, we have to be careful sometimes. And I think we've been very negligent about the mental health stuff. Because it's, you know, by saying anytime someone's triggered is dismissed, then that's, like I said before, I probably said this before, that's silencing people with mental illness. That's silencing us. Because we won't feel safe to enter that space and say that. And sometimes people with severe disorders like ours need to say that in safe spaces. And I know, political minefield, right? in safe spaces, because our triggers could potentially be deadly, okay? People can harm themselves when they're triggered, and they probably wouldn't be able to control it very well. And people will be like, okay, so people might be like, well, know your triggers and control yourself. Here's the thing, is it's hard to learn your triggers when you have DID. Because often when I get triggered, my amnesia kicks in almost immediately for the content. My amnesia kicks in, and then I can't recall what the trigger was. And so it's very hard for someone like me to learn my triggers. And I'm trying, guys, I am trying. But to expect somebody with a severe disorder like PTSD, a neurodivergence like DID, to just be like, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, white knuckle it, hold it in. Doesn't matter if you're triggered. That is not gonna work. That's gonna make people less safe. We need to have environments where certain groups of people can use the term triggered and be taken seriously. And it's been just so diluted by the popularization of this term. It's just a shame. It's a shame. And so I just want people to know the difference. Just know that if your friend has PTSD or DID or OSDD, you know, CP, any kind of trauma disorder, when they say triggered, they mean something serious. They mean something that could land them in the hospital. Not always. Triggers are on a spectrum, just like anybody. You know, you can have a minor trigger and whatever. But the thing is every time you have a trigger, you don't know if that trigger is going to cause a huge reaction or a minor reaction. And that's why people use trigger warnings. And that's why trigger warnings are useful. I understand the concept of, you know, don't censor people using trigger warnings. But see, we're censoring mentally ill people by taking away their terminology. We're censoring them because they don't feel safe to talk about the things that they need to talk about. And that's, you know, just be a kind person and try to understand that. You know, not everything has to be curated for everybody's existence. It can't be that way. We understand that. And we're constantly trying to modify our behavior and better ourselves so you guys don't have to deal with our triggers. But it's not easy to figure out what your triggers are. And so if you have triggers that you don't know, you know, don't feel bad about it and don't be ashamed of it. It's just an example. It's just, it wasn't our fault. Remember, guys with DID, everybody with DID, it wasn't our fault. Some stuff happened to us when we were kids. Now we have to deal with triggers. All we can do is try our best to learn them and learn how to cope with them when they come. But I don't think society should be expecting people with PTSD to just act normal all the time. And no, you can't use the term triggered because, you know, it's not fair to everybody else because, you know, everybody has problems. Yes, everybody has problems, but let me just tell you, there's a big difference between being frustrated over a meme and having a life-threatening flashback. Anyway, I don't know. This is James, and I just want to talk about that with you. I'm kind of like, you know who I am? I'm sort of like Flair's twin. I'm like his twin sister. So we have very similar personalities, but he's a boy and I'm a girl. And you know, and I'm 16 and he's 17, and that's so weird, I know. I feel like we're twins, but we're different ages. I don't know. DID is weird. And, you know, people with DID can be just as confused by DID as anybody else out there. Because if you don't know this, you might not know this about me, but before I knew I had DID, I did not believe in DID. I was a skeptic. I said, nah, they're just seeking attention. But then I learned by my own experience that it's real and whatever. So I don't know. We love you guys, and this is our video. Triggers, triggers, triggers. It doesn't always mean the same thing to everybody. Remember that. Okay, we love you. And thank you guys for your response to our last video because that was so... we were so scared. We were so scared to post that. But at the same time, we felt very proud of ourselves for posting it. Because hopefully other people who've been cyberstalked can see that they're not alone and they can see that they can do something about it. Raise awareness, everybody. And okay, I love you guys. We're gonna go. Leave comments, subscribe, all the stuff, you know, that people's supposed to do. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.